There have been several settings for D&D throughout its run, most are remembered fondly, others only receive a mention here or there. Did you know that there are some official settings for D&D which have been long forgotten? Greetings, travellers! I am Shoot Cum, the Chimney Summoning Wizard, and welcome to the first episode in my series on the Lost Worlds of D&D. For our first episode, we'll be looking into the world of Mystara.
But Shoot Cum, Mystara is the default setting of basic D&D. Almost everyone into D&D knows about it.
Silence, Strawman! Not that many younger players know about Mystara due to a certain group of wizards dwelling upon the coast, pushing Forgotten Realms as the default setting and cashing in on any other setting they can squeeze money out of. Mystara is not one of these. Besides, what we are looking at is not the entirety of Mystara itself, but what could be called a subsetting. We will be looking at Thunder Rift. Published in the TRS series of books by TSR, Thunder Rift is a small, fully contained milieu designed for use with Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition or Basic D&D's Rules Cyclopedia. Yes, the design philosophy for D&D was uniform back in TSR days, and conversion is fairly easy. The first book is just a setting book. The first 3 pages are information which any but the newest of Dungeon Masters would already know. There's also this useful paragraph on page 2, which sells the setting short. Note the capitalization of known world. This is another name for the most populated area in Mystara. As such, Thunder Rift is lumped in with Mystara in terms of defining settings. Every location in this book can be found on this enclosed poster map. The introduction of this book states that the vagueness of descriptions allows a DM to flesh out parts of the world as needed. Observe these 2 castles to the south of Melanir. Here are the ruins of Kral, featured in TRS 5, Night of the Newts. But what is this place? Given that some history of Thunder Rift is also provided, this could be anything from an entrance to a mega-dungeon to a friendly stronghold. While the Great Grassland is separated into upper and lower sections, they share a single short entry, and this place is not mentioned at all. Or, if it is, I could not find its entry. There are many such places on the map for a DM to flesh out on his own. With all this in one volume, a DM who aspires to make a campaign has all he needs. But there are 6 more books in this series. Every single one of them is a quest book. Interestingly, books 4 and 6 are written with a single-player character of at least 2nd level in mind, rather than a party of 6 to 8, which was standard for D&D at the time. Thunder Rift's history begins before humans arrived. Elves lived in the forests, dwarves lived in the hills, and halflings sat around eating cheese and smoking weed. Eventually, the differing outlooks of elves and dwarves resulted in a conflict sparking the Rift Wars. The elves smashed a bunch of dwarven forts with magic. The dwarves responded by setting the forests on fire. This culminated in a great battle on the Drake River where the elves and dwarves slaughtered each other wholesale. During this conflict, the halflings sat around eating cheese and smoking weed. The dwarves fled into the Farolus Hills. The elves fled into the depths of the Gauntland Forest. And the halflings sat around eating cheese and smoking weed. Neither side of this conflict would fully recover as goblins, orcs, and furries invaded the rift. Seeing that they were, in fact, being invaded by degenerates, the elves and dwarves joined forces and shattered the green and furry hordes. Of course, the halflings sat around eating cheese and smoking weed. Then the humans came. Don't worry, we're not the root of all evil in this 90s fantasy tale. For once. We did spread everywhere and had chance encounters with pole-proportioned dendrophiles, stumpy alcoholics, and these even smaller people who sit around eating cheese and smoking weed. Instead of going to war with each other, humans, halflings, dwarves and elves joined forces to fight another war against the degenerate hordes. With victory secured, the Rift Wars ended. Shortly thereafter, there was a plague which ravaged all 4 of the good races, but was cured by human clerics. This led to an agreement not to be enemies led by each race's greatest heroes from the last Rift War, and the formation of a unifying adventurers guild called the Quadrille. However, this all went to hell in a handbasket the moment 2 of the heroes were assassinated for the very American crime of miscegenation, an appropriate response to an act of love between 2 consenting adults of differing ethnic backgrounds. No one knows who is responsible, but only the halflings have an alibi. They were preoccupied with sitting around, eating cheese and smoking weed. In the years that followed, the establishment of a Mages Guild on the Mages Spire, and a Fighters Academy in nearby Box Canyon, led to a rivalry that resulted in the Box Canyon being levelled and turned into a haunted swamp known as the Gloom Fens by the Mages Guild. What a bunch of lads. A thieves' guild took umbrage to this supposed misuse of magic and backstabbed every single wizard at the Spire, then fled Thunder Rift just in case another guild of one character class decided to avenge the murders of those poor innocent magic users. I'd keep an eye on those halflings if I were you. They just sit there, eating cheese and smoking weed. What are they thinking? It is said that during dark and stormy nights, a ghostly sailing ship can be seen cresting the rocky crags of the Bone Hills as if they were the turbulent waves of a roiling sea. This is an adventure hook for TRS-7 in the Phantom's wake. The ship is called the Hollandes, and presumably first set sail when the land in Thunder Rift was beneath the waves. More recently, a small village of Rakasta fled righteous persecution and settled somewhere in Thunder Rift, presumably in the mountains just to the east of the rift. As if the threat of being glomped by gnolls wasn't enough of the furry menace, these cats are massive weeaboos. At least they keep to themselves. If you want to play as one, TRS-6, Rage of the Rakasta, contains not only a quest to rescue these wayward weebs from the consequences of their actions, but also contains a Rakasta class to be used with the D&D basic rules. Books 2 through 7 can all be run independently of the Thunder Rift setting. In fact, TRS-2, Quest for the Silver Sword, assumes that you spent several days travelling to Torlin, even though the city of Melnir is but an hour's walk down the road, and TRS-4, Sword and Shield, has the heroes come from a nearby unnamed village. Fortunately, it is not difficult to adapt these books to fit either a Thunder Rift campaign or any other milieu. In fact, the Archmage Melinsta Gandaldor of the Mages Musings YouTube channel features TRS-3 Assault on a Raven's Ruin in his ongoing Old School Essentials Keep on the Borderlands review cap series. The Archmage even mentions the village of Kleiner. Thunder Rift is a fine setting for both beginners and veterans of D&D. Unfortunately, it immediately concedes the idea of being an independent setting, and few of the books commit to the idea of being set in the Rift, despite being from a series set there. Do give it a chance, though. The Mistara fan site, Vaults of Pandias, has a page of additional materials if you find the TRS series of books fall short of your expectations. Until we next meet, fare thee well.